Dr. Nic Weatherly, thanks a lot for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I was pretty excited to get Nic for a few minutes just to chat about performance management, organizational behavior management. If you're helping further the science and help a lot of learners, then that's all we care about. And if we can share something that works, let's share it. It's not about proprietary stuff, people having a secret sauce. I mean, these are just good behavioral principles, just 4 of them. So, Nic's got a pretty interesting history, graduate of Western Michigan University. He's got practical experience both at Aubrey Daniels and FIT. He was a previous president of APBA. How do you say it again?
APBA.
APBA.
Yep.
So, as a young guy, he's got quite a history of experience. And so, tell me, what are your thoughts? Aubrey Daniels talks a bit about positive reinforcement resulting in discretionary effort, and negative reinforcement sometimes resulting in the bare minimum performance.
Yep.
What's your take on your position on whether or not employees in a workplace really engage in peak performance or discretionary effort when positive reinforcement is the motivator as opposed to avoiding something unpleasant?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I think sometimes can get lost in the positive negative reinforcement discussion is that it really is a balance of multiple variables and multiple consequences. And I think, so for example, I often talk about how, you can use negative reinforcement to get somebody in the room and then just make sure that they have a reason for being in that room after that, something good. They see value in that. And I think it's a good thing for a manager to try to, seek the value in their employees, worlds, and then be able to link their behavior to something of value. I think so. That's why there's a role for both. I don't think it's one or the other that might, control it at like a molecular level. But I like, striving for. You need rules. Putting rules in place will add a negative reinforcement contingency. You need to set those expectations, but just once they're doing it, best case scenario, you can link it with something. An external reinforcer that's positive to them, and then fade that out, and hopefully they're doing something that actually works. That I'm going to keep doing this not just because Brett told me and Brett's right. I'm going to do it because Brett showed me that this stuff actually makes my day better and actually makes the things that are valuable to me better. So
if it's sustainable with natural contingencies and fading out those artificial rewards.
Yeah.
So that was interesting, the way you said possibly getting people there to show up. So that might be, oftentimes you might see that there's a rule or, people should show up on time, and some of that might be driven by negative reinforcement to avoid losing their job or to follow the rules and avoid some disciplinary action. But it's interesting. So you're saying once they get there, you think that the contingencies can be put in place to use positive reinforcement and then gradually phase out the artificial type contrived reinforcers till the natural performance contacts the rewards.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And I think optimally, a good manager, a good coach has to set up the positive and negative reinforcement contingencies. But if a good coach can identify the natural reinforcers and then work to systematically link their performance to those natural reinforcers, understanding that some natural reinforcers are going to be more powerful than others, I think at least you're on the right track, because you always need both, but at least it makes sure that you're not ignoring one big chunk of the equation. So the things that I try to start with, and I'm not the only one, is try to take things that take a lot of time and a lot of effort. Like what makes Wednesdays so brutal for you? And it's like, well, it takes me a long time to do this, and it takes a lot of effort to do this, and that's why there's this misinterpretation of like resistance to change. Is that, well, people aren't really resistant to change. It just change takes time and takes effort, and there's a lot of competing contingencies with that, and they're doing the thing that they're doing because it works. So if you can, we can identify best practice, for example, in our research. But if we can't disseminate that in a way that is quick and easy for people, then they're not going to do it. You know, people aren't doing something else because they don't know that there's a better way. They might know there's a better way, but that other way is a big pain in the butt, and it takes a lot of time and effort. So trying to find those, I think that's my first place for natural reinforcers, and then kind of going from there.
Yeah, because any change in behavior or change in rituals or change in habits for an employee, there could be a history of going out on a limb and trying something and failure occurring, and they already know what they're previously doing. They're comfortable with it, right? So sometimes change, even if you're telling them and they're rule governed, you're telling them this is what you'll get out of it, they might really need to somehow experience the reinforcers. Do you have any suggestions on how to get people to kind of experience them, so that way it's errorless sort of, and they're willing to make change?
I like the way you put that, because we talk about it with rule governance a lot. Is a manager gives you a rule, and there's a level of uncertainty there because you haven't experienced that consequence. That's why it's rule governed. However, at some point, if you don't see that rule actually pays off, then you're going to start doing something else. A rule that you made yourself, or a rule for an undesired behavior that you're not supposed to be doing. So I think the idea of being able to show them that this works, look for small opportunities for improvement. I think then you could get some buy-in in your leadership process. I think that might help.
We did a talk today on key performance indicators in order to scale a business with quality. If you had to pick, say it's the human services industry, if you had to pick a couple key performance indicators that you think are very important for a human service agency to grow, what would you look at?
I think the key things that I always like looking at, one, are the kind of classic Bill Abernathy, metrics that he looks at in terms of, regulatory compliance is a big one that sometimes is overlooked. So that's something you have to look at your cash flow and your expenses and so on and so forth, and that's big. But making sure that you have metrics that can differentiate a good clinician, for example, from a underproductive, poor clinician, and because sometimes they're meeting all these expectations, but I can't tell this person different from this person. So making sure you have good clinical productivity metrics there. But that regulatory compliance one is a big one nowadays when there's so many billing systems attached to it. Most companies have multiple regulatory bodies over them. So that's one that I tend to spend a little bit of time on, because that's a big one, and it's not as obvious as some of the other ones that kind of keep the lights on and stuff like that.
So compliance to those things that keep you in business.
Yeah.
And we in our company, we often talk quite a bit about people finding their niche or something that they're really excited about. And I found that if there's that one thing that they're doing that's very individualized to what they love, it makes the other 98% of the things they do all worth it. Have you come across that where you work with leaders to help people kind of find what their passion is within the job at all?
Yeah. That's a really good way of putting it. I haven't really thought about it like that, but yeah, it's kind of fun to think about that. I think there are some people that have the passion, but it's for something bad. They like a level of authority, like bossing people around, and so on and so forth. But there are some people that just they like seeing they're so far away from senior leaders from the front line that they kind of get disconnected from what their company actually does. And I've seen people that have tried to, not necessarily manage by wandering around, but actually be able to see the impact on the consumer. And sometimes you lose sight of that when you get to a certain level, and finding why somebody got into this industry in the first place is kind of gratifying.
Dr. Nic Weatherly, it was a pleasure.
Man.
Yeah, I really appreciate being around other colleagues that use behavioral science to improve the lives of people. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course.